was earlier before the interview, I was actually looking at your book, which is on Amazon, which probably later in the show we'll talk about. The title of which is How to Choose Your Singing Teacher. I'll add it in the show notes. And I was looking at the sample, and one of the things that really touched me was this story you had with your dad, that your first teacher, music teacher, was a little far away from your village, and you would have to take a bus. And I believe you said that it usually got dark by the time you came back, and you were always thinking if your dad was there, and he was always there. And I was hoping you would share that. What if there was anything you would like to say more about it?
Um, yeah, it's quite interesting. There's a lot of aspects to the story, if you know what I mean. Um, in fact, it was just, saying that my father and my mother were very supportive of my hobby. And my mother is the one who actually discovered that I love singing, and she took me in hand in hand. She took me to the conservatorium in the little city we used to live, and she introduced me to this. It was important for her that I'll do something with the singing. She discovered that, and at the age of 12, I think it was my first lessons. I wanted to play the guitar, but my hands were too small. I
Hmm.
have smaller hands compared to my height, but I couldn't really hold the neck, of the guitar. So they said, start singing, take lessons in singing, and then later on you catch up with the guitar, which was exactly what happened. But what happened, we lived in a little city, and I started there, and I really loved that, really loved my singing lessons. And then my parents decided to move, I think around that year. They moved to a village, to an artist village. My father is an artist.
Mhm.
It's one of these pieces behind me. And it's part of the story, yes. And what happened is that I needed to give up my singing lessons, or at least that's what I thought. And they say, no, you will be able to carry on your singing lessons, and you'll take a bus from school, and our village was further away from the main road, and the buses would not go all the way to the village. And so it stopped where it stopped, and then we used to hitchhike, and it was about, I don't know, about a mile or so, but up the hill it was very difficult to walk it, so you hitchhike, and it's not for a girl to do it by herself, at the age of 12. So my father used to go down the hill, he didn't have a car, and he would wait for me so we can hitchhike together. So I would not be alone. And as it came to winter in Israel in the winter, 5 o'clock is late, is dark already. So in the winter time, he would come and wait for me. And there was a little fear in me that he would not make it by the time, not that he would never come. I was sure he will be there, but maybe he didn't get a lift or so. Anyway, so there was the thing about which later on proved itself that my father always honored his word. He said he's going to be there, and he's going to be there. And I think this is a great start for a child. Not everybody, has the privilege of having parents that would support them to start with and be there for them. This is calling be there for somebody. And of course, yeah, that was for me a challenge. I kept it for a couple of years or so, and then I made my own way. I moved to another teacher, and didn't need my father to come to see me there, but he's still reminding me. He's 92 years old, and he reminds me this episode that he used to. Maybe you think I still owe him, so.
Yeah.
I gave back. I did. I'm sure. I did a
Yes.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and you were mentioning that the sculpture in the back is your dad's.
Yeah. My father is a sculptor, and he makes he's not creating right now, like he's very frail, but he created a beautiful um, collection of bronze sculptures, and I'm actually running his business now as part of my other things that I do. So I teach singing, I sing sometimes, and I do run his art business as well. So that's for another interview.
Yes, yes. No, that's amazing. And what you were saying, it really resonated that it's to see that your father was supporting you in that way at that early age,
Mhm.
and that level of trust um, and faith in his presence. That's an excellent example to develop and mirror that in the future for as you grow up.
Yeah. And as I think that, yeah, well, later we'll go into it probably more, but these are the things that I adopted as a teacher as well, as knowing that I'll be there for my students, I'll be there for them, and I think when you experience it on yourself and the effect of that trust and being trustworthy for people, it's very powerful. It's very powerful to be able to provide that for other people, and to create a surrounding and that people feel safe to they trust you, so that it's so easy to grow when there's a lot of trust around.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe as you were saying, it's easy to dismiss sometimes, but in my own life, in any kind of skill or thing that you learn, in hindsight, I can see if there was the necessary support and love, which really provides a container for expression and doing experiments and making mistakes. It
Mhm.
could just it could just increase our capacity to learn and success much higher. As a matter of fact, I think many students um, they just drop out. We don't complete our journeys because of that
Yeah.
lack of safety.
You know, I will say something about choosing singing as a life, like a. I think that I meet students or older students. I'd say I work a lot with the amateur. I would say, or people who love singing in the age of 50 and more, and I hear them saying a story. It's a story that repeats itself a lot in my studio, that they wanted to make something with the singing, and they were hoping that they will go and study it professionally. They'll do it, and their parents would tell them it's not a profession. Find yourself first a profession, become a lawyer, engineer, computer a engineer, whatever, but don't choose singing because there's no money in it. And a lot of people, they missed out opportunities in a very early age. It's very hard to catch up when you're 50 or 40. Then you have family, children, or whatever, and it's singing. It's very hard to make it as a profession when you're much older. So, and they tell me, wow, we so envy, or I don't know, of your choice. And I tell them that it wasn't an easy choice. It's like, but I had my parents backing me up, supporting me for many years as well, to go after my dreams, to fulfill these dreams, and to become artist, because my father was an artist. You could tell that art is very important, and if he would chop my wings, I would not be happy. So I'll become a doctor or become something that I could do a lot of great things, but I didn't choose them.
Yeah, no,
So,
this is great, and it's very heartwarming actually. It's a good comparison because I have a background. I'm coming from India, and we have a very strong template of become a doctor and engineer. That's what parents want, the Indian parents want, and usually that's what happens. People, I had friends who either became doctors or who became engineers, and you have to be really rebellious to pick a third option. I want to be an actor or a musician as a profession. So in any case, yeah, yes,
okay.
yes, yes.
I had a friend, I think he was an artist from India in London when I lived in London. So I looked at him and I said to him, how did we both manage, a Jewish woman and an Indian boy, to become artists in a culture that asks us to be doctors and engineers? we're very similar in this. So it's funny. Like I I feel like very privileged to choose what I wanted to do for living and to do that.
Yeah, no, excellent. I had a couple of questions that came to me. One was, of course, something that you already mentioned, that your dad being an artist, and seems like he has taken that to his later years. In an earlier conversation before the podcast, you were mentioning how he started his sculpting uh, things much later in life. But I was wondering, was that very clear from the early age that your father and your parents wanted to support art? Was it a very strong presence in your house?
Yeah, well, I lived, I breathed art, since I was a kid. I saw my father sculpting, and the whole house was full of his art, and also frustration, not just art, because he had very difficult years. He immigrated from Egypt to Israel. It was difficult for him. He had a lot of culture shocks to overcome. And art was spoken in the family, and we lived it. And then we moved to an artist village, so my neighbors were artists. There were workshops around me. I saw painters and poets and dancers, and I lived that for so many years. And the children around me were also very creative. Some of them are very talented artists nowadays, and they continued. I think when you have that kind of creativity around you, surrounding, and the family, and in my case, it was a village, supporting it, then of course art was part of our livelihood. So it wasn't weird or strange to become an artist. Like so if that's what you meant.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah, and thank you for touching on that, because one of the things, when I heard you mentioned that your family had moved to an artist village, I wanted to ask you if that had any impact on you, especially in those earlier years. And it seems like that it did have an impact, and you were able to really be steeped into seeing how an artist collective actually functions, as you were saying, workshops and how they make a livelihood.
yeah,
Um,
I think
be-
that an artist village had is there's not so many artist village in the world, and not for nothing. I think to get a lot of artists living together, there's a lot of ego, and sharing is not the best thing. And I also discovered, the problematics, the problems about living together with artists. And I remember that I asked my parents, can we actually move to another place? Because I didn't like so much the environment. But then I also had, I loved my friends, and I loved the surrounding and the view. I mean, it's absolutely breathtaking view. I know we live on the Carmel Mountains overlooking the Mediterranean with the valley, and really beautiful place. So that was part of it as well. I would say that there was a sense of freedom, of free spirit, like life. And I think that helps to cultivate an artist, obviously. I would say that I remember myself, I wrote a lot of poems, and my father, even from a very early age, my father used to write them for me, because I didn't know how to write, at the age of 4 or so. And I had a whole book of poems that I wrote in that age, very naive, obviously. And then later on, I continued to write poems, and I also published few songs, and I wrote my own music and, composed them. But then when singing, serious singing, opera singer came in, I just sort of like put that writing art on the side and cleared the way for singing. I'm still kind of puzzled by that. how I didn't really continue to write poems, and I dedicated myself to one sort of art, kind of art. I felt it should be, it sort of called me to be total, to give all of myself to one format, to concentrate on one thing. And I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I did it because I put a lot of learning and hours and hours of practicing to become an opera singer. And I thought that the profession is, demanding. It's very demanding, and you need to practice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I wanted to, you said a couple of amazing things.